The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle as Kate Middleton stood before her bedroom mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she fastened the black pearl earrings that had belonged to Princess Diana, the weight of the day ahead pressed heavily on her shoulders. Yet her reflection showed nothing but composed determination. Today would test every lesson she had learned about royal duty. About strength in the face of unimaginable loss. William appeared in the doorway behind her, his naval uniform pressed to perfection, metals gleaming against the dark fabric. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a moment, the carefully constructed walls they had built around their emotions threatened to crumble. He had been quieter than usual over the past week, carrying the burden of organizing a farewell that no one should ever have to plan. The phone call had come 7 days earlier, shattering their world with news that would forever change the royal family. Catherine remembered the exact moment William's face had gone pale, the way his grip tightened on the phone, the careful control in his voice as he spoke words that seemed impossible to believe. When he hung up, they had held each other in silence, knowing that their lives had just shifted in a way that could never be undone. Kate reached for William's hand, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. They had weathered many storms together, but this felt different. This was not a scandal or controversy that would pass with time. This was permanent, final, and absolutely devastating. Yet, even in their grief, they knew the world would be watching, waiting to see how the future king and queen would handle their darkest hour. The children had been told the night before, their innocent questions breaking hearts that were already shattered. George, with his serious 9-year-old eyes, had tried to be strong for his younger siblings. Charlotte had cried quietly, not fully understanding why everyone seemed so sad. Louis had simply asked when they would see their beloved family member again, not comprehending that never was the only answer. As they prepared to leave their private apartments, Kate caught a glimpse of the family photograph on William's desk. It had been taken just 3 months earlier during a private gathering at Balmoral. Everyone had been laughing at something silly, Louis had said, their faces bright with joy and love. The contrast with today felt almost cruel in its timing. William straightened his shoulders, the transformation from grieving family member to future monarch happening before Kate's eyes. She had witnessed this change many times before, but today it seemed more profound, more necessary than ever. The weight of centuries of royal tradition settled around him like an invisible cloak, demanding strength when all he wanted was to collapse under the weight of his loss. Kate made her own silent transformation, calling upon years of training and natural grace to find the composure she would need for the cameras, the crowds, and the ceremony ahead. She thought of all the people who would be watching, not just in Britain but around the world. Looking for comfort and stability in the face of shared grief, the drive to Westminster Abbey was conducted in near silence, their hands clasped tightly together in the back seat of the state car. Through the bulletproof windows, they could see crowds of mourners lining the streets, many holding flowers and photographs, their faces reflecting the same sense of loss that filled the royal car. Kate watched the faces in the crowd, seeing her own grief reflected back at her from strangers, who had never met the person they were mourning, but who felt connected through years of shared experiences and public moments. There were elderly women clutching handkerchiefs, young mothers holding children who didn't quite understand why everyone seemed so sad, and men removing their caps in respect as the motorcade passed. The weight of representing not just themselves but an entire nation's grief settled heavily on both their shoulders. They were no longer just a husband and wife mourning a personal loss. They were symbols of continuity, of strength, of the enduring nature of the monarchy even in its darkest hours. As Westminster Abbey came into view, its ancient spires reaching toward the grey London sky, Kate felt William's hand tighten in hers. The building had witnessed centuries of royal celebrations and sorrows, from coronations to funerals, from weddings to moments just like this one. Today it would hold their pain while the world watched. The car slowed to a stop, and Kate could hear the distant sound of the crowds, the clicking of cameras, and the solemn tolling of bells. In moments, they would step out into the public eye, their private grief becoming a shared national moment. Every gesture would be analyzed, every expression interpreted. every tear or lack thereof scrutinized by millions. William turned to her one last time before the door opened, his blue eyes reflecting years of love and partnership. They had promised to support each other through everything when they married, but neither had imagined a day quite like this one. Yet here they were, ready to face it together, drawing strength from each other and from the knowledge that their love could withstand even this ultimate test. The door handle turned, and Kate took a deep breath, preparing to step into a day that would forever be remembered in the history of the royal family. As they emerged from the car, the weight of the nation's expectations and their own profound loss merged into a single moment of quiet dignity that would define their legacy for years to come. The ancient stones of Westminster Abbey seemed to absorb the collective grief of the thousands gathered within its walls. Kate walked beside William down the nave, their footsteps echoing in the solemn silence broken only by the occasional sob from the congregation. Every step felt measured, deliberate, carrying the weight of centuries of royal protocol even as their hearts threatened to break with each passing moment. The abbey was filled to capacity with world leaders, members of the royal family, close friends, and dignitaries from across the Commonwealth. Kate recognized faces from years of state functions and private gatherings, all united now in their shared sense of loss. The Queen sat in the front row, her black outfit stark against her pale skin, her usual vibrant presence dimmed by the magnitude of the day. As they took their seats in the front pew, Kate's eyes fell upon the simple wooden coffin draped with the royal standard. Fresh flowers adorned the top, their beauty a sharp contrast to the finality they represented. She remembered choosing those flowers just 2 days earlier, wanting something that would have brought a smile to the face of the person they were honoring. The Archbishop of Canterbury rose to speak, his voice carrying across the vast space with words of comfort and remembrance. Kate found herself thinking not of the formal ceremony unfolding around them, but of quiet Sunday afternoons at Sandringham, of shared jokes over family dinners, of the sound of laughter that would never again fill the rooms they had all called home. William sat rigidly beside her, his military training evident in his perfect posture, even as she could sense the emotional storm raging within him. She knew him well enough to recognize the small signs of his struggle, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands remained clasped just a bit too tightly in his lap, the barely perceptible tremor that ran through him when certain words were spoken. The first reading came from a passage that had been personally chosen, words that spoke of love transcending death and memories lasting forever. Kate closed her eyes briefly as the familiar verses washed over her, remembering the conversation they'd had about which readings to include. Even in death, the person they were mourning had wanted the service to be about celebration rather than despair, about the love that remained rather than the loss they all felt. George, Charlotte, and Louis sat nearby with their nanny, their young faces serious as they tried to understand the gravity of the occasion. Kate's heart ached watching them process grief they were too young to fully comprehend. George kept looking between his parents and the congregation, his natural curiosity about the formal proceedings mixing with confusion about why everyone seemed so sad. The music began, a hauntingly beautiful piece that had been specifically requested. As the notes filled the abbey, Kate felt tears threatening for the first time that day. The melody carried memories of family gatherings, of birthdays and holidays, of all the moments that had woven their lives together over the years. She blinked rapidly, calling upon every ounce of training to maintain her composure while the music threatened to unlock the grief she had been holding so carefully in check around them. The congregation shifted slightly as the emotional weight of the service began to affect everyone present. Kate noticed an elderly woman in the second row dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, and a young man in military uniform struggling to maintain his composure. The shared grief was palpable, creating an invisible bond between everyone gathered in the ancient cathedral. William reached for her hand during the musical interlude, their fingers interlacing in a gesture so natural it seemed to happen without thought. The simple touch grounded her, reminding her that they were facing this together, that their strength came not just from years of royal training but from the deep love and partnership they had built together. The eulogies began, each speaker sharing memories that painted a picture of a life well lived, of someone who had touched countless hearts through both public service and private kindness. Kate listened to stories she had heard before and some she hadn't, each one adding another layer to her understanding of the person they were honoring and deepening her sense of loss. As one speaker shared a particularly touching memory about family holidays and children's laughter, Kate saw William's carefully maintained control waver slightly. His breathing changed almost imperceptibly, and she squeezed his hand gently, offering silent support. They had developed this language of small gestures over years of public appearances, ways of communicating comfort and strength without words. The ceremony continued with prayers for the grieving family and for the nation, words asking for comfort. In the midst of loss and strength to carry on the legacy of service that had defined the life they were celebrating, Kate found herself thinking about legacy, about the ways love and influence continued even after death, about the responsibility they all carried to honor what had been built before them. When the time came for the final hymn, the entire congregation rose as one, their voices joining together in words of hope and faith. Kate sang quietly, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. Beside her, William's deeper voice carried the melody, his years of chapel services at school serving him well even in this most difficult moment. As the service neared its end, Kate felt the weight of what came next. Soon they would follow the coffin out of the abbey and into the waiting cars that would carry them to the final resting place. Soon the formal ceremony would give way to the more intimate burial service, where the carefully maintained composure of the public goodbye would face its greatest test. The final blessing was pronounced, words of peace and eternal rest that echoed off the ancient stones and settled into the hearts of everyone present. In the silence that followed, Kate could hear only the soft sound of breathing and the distant tolling of bells from across London, marking the end of an era and the beginning of a future forever changed by this profound loss. The procession from Westminster Abbey to Windsor Castle moved with ceremonial precision, yet Kate felt as though they were traveling through a dream. The streets of London were lined with thousands of mourners, their flowers creating a colorful carpet of remembrance that stretched for miles. Through the car window she watched faces in the crowd, each one reflecting the same sense of loss that filled her own heart. Children held handmade signs with messages of love and gratitude, their innocent artwork somehow more moving than any formal tribute could be. Elderly men removed their hats as the cortege passed, their weathered faces speaking of decades of respect and loyalty. Women clutched photographs to their chests, images from years of public engagements and family moments that had made them feel connected to the royal family's joys and sorrows. William stared straight ahead, his profile etched with determination and grief in equal measure. Kate knew he was seeing not just the crowds but the weight of responsibility that came with this moment. He was saying goodbye to more than just a beloved family member. He was witnessing the end of an era and the beginning of his own deeper role in the monarchy's future. The silence in the car was broken only by the distant sound of church bells across the capital, all ringing in synchronized tribute. Kate thought about all the bells that had rung for happier occasions, their wedding day, the births of their children, jubilee celebrations. Today, their solemn tolling marked a different kind of milestone, one measured in loss rather than joy. As they passed through the countryside between London and Windsor, the crowds thinned but never disappeared entirely. People stood in fields and on bridges, their presence a testament to the deep connection between the royal family and the nation they served. Kate saw a farmer standing beside his tractor, his cap held respectfully in his hand, and a group of schoolchildren who had clearly been given permission to leave class to witness history passing by their village. The Windsor Castle gates came into view, and Kate felt her breath catch. This was where the most private and painful part of the day would unfold, where the public ceremony would give way to personal grief among family and closest friends. The ancient stones of the castle had witnessed centuries of royal farewells, but today felt uniquely devastating in its finality. In the private chapel at Windsor, the gathering was much smaller, consisting only of immediate family and a handful of the closest friends. Gone were the world leaders and dignitaries, replaced by the people who had shared everyday moments, inside jokes, and quiet family dinners. The atmosphere was more intimate, but somehow more intense, as if the walls themselves were holding the concentrated grief of those who had loved most deeply. Kate watched the Queen during the private service, marveling at her composure while recognizing the profound cost of maintaining such dignity in the face of heartbreak. At her age, the Queen had attended far too many farewells, had said goodbye to too many people she loved. Yet she sat with perfect posture, her faith and sense of duty carrying her through another of life's most difficult trials. The children sat quietly nearby, their understanding of the day's significance growing with each moment. Charlotte had asked earlier why everyone looked so sad, and Kate had struggled to find words that would explain loss without causing fear. She had settled on talking about love that continues even when people have to go away, about memories that stay in hearts forever. During the private prayers, Kate found her mind wandering to specific memories: Sunday lunches where the table would be filled with laughter, holiday traditions that would never be quite the same, the sound of a particular voice telling stories that had captivated the children. These were the losses that no public ceremony could address, the private griefs that would be felt in quiet moments for years to come. William stood for one of the readings, his voice steady as he shared words that had been personally meaningful to the person they were honoring. Kate felt proud of his strength even as her heart broke watching him carry out this most difficult duty. His composure was remarkable, but she could see the cost in the slight tremor in his hands, the careful control of his breathing, the way he gripped the podium just a bit too tightly. The committal prayers began, and Kate felt the reality of the moment settling around them all like a heavy cloak. This was the final goodbye, the last time they would all be together in this way. After today, there would be memories and photographs, stories and traditions, but never again would they hear that beloved voice or see that familiar smile. As they moved outside for the burial, Kate was struck by the quiet beauty of the cemetery. Ancient trees provided shade for weathered headstones, many bearing the names of other royal family members who had found their final rest in this peaceful place. It was a setting of dignity and tranquility, fitting for someone who had lived a life of service and devotion. The final prayers were offered as the sun began to set, casting golden light through the leaves and creating shadows that seemed to dance around the gathering. Kate thought about cycles of life and death, about the way love transcended physical presence, about the responsibility they all carried to honor the memory of the person they were laying to rest. When the time came to place earth on the grave, Kate watched as William stepped forward with quiet dignity. His hand shook almost imperceptibly as he took the small silver spade, but his movements were steady and sure. She followed, her own gesture feeling both symbolic and deeply personal, a final act of love and respect. The small group stood together in the gathering dusk, each lost in private thoughts and memories. Kate felt the weight of the day settling into her bones, the exhaustion that comes not just from ceremony and travel but from the emotional marathon of public grief. Yet alongside the weariness was a sense of completion, of having honored their loved one with the dignity and love they deserved. As they began the quiet walk back toward the castle, Kate slipped her arm through William's, offering and receiving comfort in the simple gesture. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and the beginning of life forever changed by this loss. But tonight they had said goodbye with grace, strength, and the kind of love that honors both the person they had lost and the family bonds that would carry them forward. The private reception following the burial was held in one of Windsor Castle's smaller drawing rooms, a space that had witnessed countless family gatherings over the decades. Kate moved through the room with quiet grace, checking on elderly relatives and ensuring that everyone felt welcomed and cared for, even as her own heart remained heavy with grief. The conversations were subdued, filled with gentle reminiscences and shared memories that brought both smiles and tears. She found herself standing beside a display of photographs that had been arranged on a side table, images spanning decades of family life. There were formal portraits alongside candid snapshots from holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, and quiet Sunday afternoons. Each picture told a story, captured a moment in time that now felt infinitely precious because there would be no new ones to add to the collection. William appeared at her side, carrying 2 cups of tea, a simple gesture that spoke of their partnership and his attention to her needs even in the midst of his own grief. They stood together in comfortable silence, looking at the photographs while around them. Family members and close friends shared quiet conversations filled with love and remembrance. George approached them hesitantly, his young face serious with questions he was still trying to understand. He had been remarkably well behaved throughout the day, sensing the gravity of the occasion even if he couldn't fully grasp its meaning. Kate knelt down to his level, ready to answer whatever he might ask. Knowing that children often see truths that adults struggle to articulate, the little boy asked simply why everyone seemed so sad when they were also sharing happy stories. Kate found herself explaining that sometimes sadness and happiness could exist together, that remembering beautiful times with someone we love could make us feel both grateful and heartbroken at the same time. William listened to her gentle explanation, and she saw him nod slightly, as if her words were helping him process his own complex emotions. As the afternoon wore on, Kate noticed how different family members were handling their grief in different ways. Some sought comfort in shared stories and laughter, while others sat quietly, lost in private thoughts and memories. The diversity of responses reminded her that grief was deeply personal, that there was no right or wrong way to mourn someone who had meant so much to so many people. The Queen, despite her advanced age and the obvious toll the day had taken, moved through the room with characteristic grace, offering comfort to others even as she carried her own profound loss. Kate watched in admiration as the monarch listened to a young cousin share a childhood memory, her attention complete and genuine despite the exhaustion that must have been weighing heavily upon her. Later, as the formal reception began to wind down, Kate found herself in a quieter corner of the room with several of the female family members. The conversation turned to practical matters, how to preserve important belongings, which traditions should continue, and how to keep cherished memories alive for the younger generation. These discussions felt both necessary and surreal. The reality of life continuing, despite the enormous hole that had been left in all their hearts. William was engaged in his own conversations across the room, handling arrangements and decisions that had fallen to him as one of the senior family members. Kate could see the weight of new responsibilities settling on his shoulders, the way his role was already shifting in response to the loss they had all suffered. He was no longer just a grieving family member, but someone who would need to help guide others through their grief while managing his own. As the sun began to set over Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the ancient walls, Kate stepped outside onto one of the terraces for a moment of quiet reflection. The gardens stretched out before her, their carefully maintained beauty a testament to generations of care and attention. She thought about continuity, about the way some things endured even when others were lost forever. William joined her on the terrace, and they stood together watching the light fade from the sky. The silence between them was comfortable, born of years together and shared understanding that went beyond words. They had faced many challenges as a couple, but nothing quite like this. A loss so profound it would reshape their family forever. The evening air carried the scent of roses from the garden below, a reminder that life continued its cycles even in the midst of grief. Kate thought about all the seasons that beloved person had witnessed from these same gardens, all the flowers that had bloomed and faded, all the changes that had come and gone, while the essential beauty of the place remained constant. As they prepared to return inside, Kate reflected on the strength they had all shown throughout the day. There had been moments of weakness, tears that couldn't be held back, and emotions that threatened to overwhelm, but they had carried each other through with grace and dignity. The family bonds that had been tested by loss had ultimately proven strong enough to bear the weight of shared grief. The children were growing tired, their usual energy depleted by the emotional intensity of the day. Kate and William made the decision to return home, knowing that tomorrow would bring its own challenges and that rest would be essential for all of them. The drive back to their residence was quiet, each family member lost in their own thoughts about the day and what it meant for their future, back in the safety and privacy of their own home. Kate helped the children prepare for bed, listening to their questions and observations about the day. Their innocent perspectives on death, memory, and family provided a different lens through which to view their loss, one that emphasized love and connection rather than finality and separation. As she tucked Charlotte into bed, her daughter asked whether the person they had said goodbye to could still see them, and whether they would be watching over the family. Kate found herself drawing on her own faith and hope as she explained that love never really ends, that the best parts of people we care about stay with us always through memories, through the lessons they taught us, and through the love they shared with us. The house settled into quiet as the children finally fell asleep, exhausted by the day's emotions even if they didn't fully understand them. Kate and William found themselves alone together for the first time since early morning, finally able to let down their guard and acknowledge their own grief without the need to be strong for others. In the quiet sanctuary of their private sitting room, Kate and William finally allowed themselves to feel the full weight of the day without the need for public composure. The carefully maintained strength they had shown for hours began to crack, revealing the raw grief beneath. Kate curled up in the corner of their familiar sofa, while William sat heavily in his favorite chair, his head in his hands as the emotions he had held in check throughout the ceremony finally found release. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable but necessary, as each processed the magnitude of what they had just experienced. The formal farewell was complete, but the real work of grief was only beginning. Kate thought about all the firsts they would now face: the first birthday without that beloved presence, the first Christmas morning, the first family gathering where they would instinctively look for a face that would no longer be there. William spoke first, his voice rough with exhaustion and unshed tears. He talked about the weight of responsibility he felt, not just for his own grief, but for helping the family navigate this loss while maintaining the dignity and strength expected of the royal family. Kate listened without trying to fix or minimize his feelings, understanding that sometimes the greatest gift was simply bearing witness to pain. She shared her own struggles from the day, the difficulty of staying composed when the music threatened to break her resolve, the challenge of explaining death to children who deserved honesty but also protection from fears too heavy for their young shoulders. They talked about the moments that had been hardest, the unexpected waves of emotion that had caught them off guard, and the strength they had found in each other throughout the ordeal. The conversation turned to practical matters that felt surreal in their mundanity. There were thank you notes to write to the thousands who had sent condolences, arrangements to make for memorial donations, and decisions about how to preserve and honor the memory of the person they had lost. Even grief, it seemed, came with a to-do list that had to be managed alongside the emotional processing. Kate's phone buzzed, occasionally with messages from friends and family checking on them, but she ignored it for now. Tonight was about allowing themselves to simply be human, to feel their loss without the pressure to respond graciously or maintain their public roles. Tomorrow would be soon enough to return to the world's expectations and demands. As the evening deepened, they found themselves sharing specific memories that the day's ceremony had brought to the surface. William recalled a conversation about duty and service that had shaped his understanding of his future role. Kate remembered gentle advice about marriage and motherhood that had guided her through challenging times. These personal recollections felt precious now, private treasures that no public ceremony could capture or commemorate. They talked about how to help the children process their loss in the days and weeks ahead, recognizing that grief for young ones was different, more immediate in some ways but also more adaptable. George, Charlotte, and Louis would need ongoing support to understand and cope with the absence of someone who had been a constant presence in their lives. The discussion shifted to their own roles within the royal family, acknowledging that this loss would inevitably change dynamics and responsibilities. William would be stepping into new duties and expectations, while Kate would need to provide additional support not just to her immediate family, but to the broader royal household as they all adjusted to their new reality outside their windows. The grounds of their estate were quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the crowds and ceremony of earlier in the day. Kate found comfort in this familiar setting, in the normalcy of home after hours of public performance. The children's toys scattered around the room, the stack of books on the side table, the family photographs on the mantelpiece, all these ordinary details provided anchors of continuity in a day that had felt anything but normal. William got up to check on the children, his parental instincts overriding his own need for rest and processing. Kate heard him moving quietly through the house, ensuring that George, Charlotte, and Louis were sleeping peacefully despite the emotional upheaval of the day. When he returned, he reported that all three were deep in sleep, their resilience and adaptability a source of both comfort and amazement. They discussed their schedule for the coming weeks, knowing that public duties would resume, but also understanding that they would need time to grieve privately. The balance between public service and personal healing would require careful navigation, especially as the world would be watching to see how they carried on after such a significant loss. As the clock struck midnight, marking the end of this most difficult day, Kate realized that they had somehow made it through. The funeral was complete, the final goodbye had been said with dignity and love, and their family had supported each other through the worst of it. The grief would continue, it would ebb and flow in unexpected waves for months and years to come, but the hardest part was behind them. William reached for her hand, their fingers interlocking in the gesture that had carried them through the day's most challenging moments. They had entered this day as one version of themselves and would emerge as another, forever changed by loss but also strengthened by their ability to face it together with grace and mutual support. The house settled into deep quiet around them, their children safe in their beds, the immediate demands of the day finally satisfied. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and the beginning of life after loss. But tonight they simply held each other in the silence, drawing comfort from their partnership and the knowledge that love, even in the face of death, remained the strongest force in their lives. In this private moment, away from cameras and crowds, they were not the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, but simply a husband and wife who had lost someone precious and found the strength to say goodbye with dignity while supporting each other through the darkest of days. 3 weeks after the funeral, Kate found herself in the garden at Kensington Palace, watching George attempt to teach Louis how to kick a football properly. The normalcy of the scene felt both comforting and strange. Life had continued moving forward even though part of her felt frozen in that moment. At Westminster Abbey, the children had adapted with the remarkable resilience of youth. Though she noticed they still asked questions about death and heaven that required careful, honest answers. William had returned to his official duties the week before, throwing himself into work with an intensity that both impressed and worried her. She recognized his coping mechanism, the same drive toward service and responsibility that had helped him through his mother's death years earlier. Yet she also saw the moments when his composure would slip, when a particular memory or unexpected reminder would catch him off guard and reveal the grief he carried beneath his professional demeanor. The mail continued to arrive in overwhelming volumes. Thousands of condolence letters from around the world, drawings from school children, flowers, and gifts from people who felt personally touched by their loss. Kate had taken on the task of ensuring that as many as possible received personal acknowledgement, understanding that these expressions of sympathy represented genuine care from strangers who felt connected to the royal family's joy and sorrow. Reading through the letters had become both healing and heartbreaking. Many people shared their own stories of loss, finding comfort in knowing that grief was a universal experience that even touched those who seemed to have everything. Elderly women wrote about losing their own family members, while young mothers expressed empathy for the difficulty of explaining death to children who deserved protection. from life's hardest truths. The Queen had insisted on resuming her full schedule within days of the funeral, her example of duty and continuity serving as a model for the entire family. Kate admired her resilience while worrying about the toll such stoicism might be taking. During their regular tea together the previous week, she had glimpsed moments of deep sadness behind the monarch's composed exterior. Reminders that even queens grieve like any other person who had lost someone precious. Charlotte had begun asking questions about memories, whether they would forget what the person's voice sounded like, whether the stories they used to tell would disappear over time. These conversations had led to family projects designed to preserve and honor their loved one's legacy. They created photo albums, recorded family members sharing favorite stories, and began establishing traditions that would keep cherished memories alive for future generations. The media attention had been intense but respectful, focusing on the dignity and strength the family had shown during their public goodbye. Kate appreciated the restraint shown by most outlets, though she remained protective of her children's privacy during this vulnerable time. She had made it clear that while public duties would resume, the family needed space to grieve and heal away from constant scrutiny. In quiet moments, Kate found herself thinking about the nature of public grief versus private mourning. The ceremony at Westminster Abbey had provided closure and allowed the nation to share in their loss. But the real work of healing happened in ordinary moments: bedtime conversations with children, walks in the garden, shared meals where someone's absence felt particularly acute. William had begun speaking more openly about the importance of addressing grief and mental health, inspired by his own experience of loss and the letters they had received. He saw an opportunity to use their platform to help others understand that seeking support during difficult times was a sign of strength rather than weakness. These conversations represented a shift in how the royal family approached personal challenges, embracing vulnerability as a way to connect more deeply with the people they served. The anniversary of their loved one's birth was approaching, and they had decided to mark it with a private family gathering rather than a public memorial. Kate was planning a celebration of life that focused on joy and gratitude rather than sadness, wanting the children to associate the day with love and happy memories rather than loss and mourning. As summer arrived, they made plans for their first family vacation since the funeral, recognizing that creating new memories was essential for healing while honoring the past. The trip would include some of their loved ones' favorite places, allowing them to feel close to cherished memories, while building new experiences that would help them move forward together. Kate had started a grief journal, encouraged by a counselor who specialized in helping families process loss. Writing about her feelings and memories had become a form of therapy, allowing her to work through complex emotions while creating a record of their healing journey. She hoped that someday, when her own children faced loss, they might find comfort in reading about how their parents had navigated grief with honesty and hope. The children's bedtime routines had evolved to include sharing favorite memories of the person they had lost, turning grief into gratitude and sadness into celebration. These conversations helped them all remember that love transcended death, that the best parts of people remained alive in the hearts and minds of those who cherished them. Looking ahead, Kate felt a mixture of sadness for what had been lost and hope for what could still be built. The funeral had marked an ending, but it had also demonstrated the strength of their family bonds and their ability to support each other through life's greatest challenges. They had said goodbye with dignity, honored their loved one with grace, and begun the long journey of healing together. As she watched her children play in the garden, Kate realized that grief and joy could coexist, that missing someone deeply didn't diminish the capacity for happiness in other areas of life. The person they had lost would want them to continue living fully, to find meaning in service, and to cherish the love that